from everybody as we kind of walk through today. We've got a primary focus for today's meeting is really on the draft final report that we deliver to the WTDB, and then it will be also then delivered to the governor. And hopefully we will be garnering lots of attention of such. So good to have this conversation today. So I'll call the meeting to order, and we'll see, Aaliyah, at some point if we have quorum, which we may be close already.
We have quorum.
We got quorum. So let's first take a look and see, do we have any public comments?
Not on my end.
Okay. And I'm not sure if we have any guests that are doing that. So let's take a look at, again, getting an approval of, and is that the September or November? Yeah, September's was the last meeting, minutes. And so if I could have a motion to accept the September minutes.
I can make a motion. This is Venkat.
Venkat, thank you. Thank you. Do we have a second? Yep. And that was?
I'll second that vote. Yeah, second that motion.
Okay. Oh, great. Great. That's Maggie. Thanks. Thanks, Maggie. All right. Any discussion on the minutes? All right. Being none. Yes.
I just wonder if it might make sense to quickly announce some of the new members. I think you invited a couple of folks from ODE to formally join the group. I also invited a gentleman who's here today from Portland Public Schools, who you may know, to join our group as well. So maybe they'd like to do intros.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's finish up the minutes. Are there any objection to the minute? Any objections to the minutes as written? There being none, then they're approved unanimously. Okay, thank you, Todd, for the reminder. So, so first of all, yes, the couple of members that have been working actually actively in the background and participating with us and so forth that we have recommended for membership in the WRC. The first one is Maggie Shia, and Maggie, she's waving hello there. We're glad to have you as a member of this this group and so forth, and deeply, deeply support or appreciate your support and continuing work on this, the OES platform and so forth. So welcome. Our other member representing tribes and org is Susan Ceramic. And Susan, I think you're probably out there somewhere. If you wave on your camera so everybody get a chance to see your face who may not know you. Susan has also been actually very, very active for some time, quite frankly, with OES, and great to have her directly engaged into this conversation and so forth. So, and Todd, do you have a member then you'd like to introduce?
Yeah, Chris is here. Chris, would you go ahead and introduce yourself and where you're from?
Happy to. Thanks, Todd, and thanks everyone for having me. I'm Chris Breida. I'm the Director of Career and Technical Education in Portland Public Schools.
Oh, excellent. Great to have you on board, Chris. Okay. Do we have any guests out there that may want to add an intro to our before we move in officially to other business? All right, there being none, I'm trying to get rid of something on the bottom of my screen so I can see people. So, all right. So, Tom, did you have anything prior to actually jumping into the report that you'd like to you want to do a pitch for ACTE or?
Sure. Anybody who hasn't yet registered for the April ACTE conference over in Seaside, April, please go to our website and get on board. It's going to be a good one.
You generally, I think, take pre-registrations and so forth for that conference, and it's also well attended. So expect the same this year, Tom.
Yeah, it's the registration has been good so far, and the only thing I can suggest is if you want to go, you better get in fairly early. We have an early bird special going through the end of the month, then it goes up $50 after that. But we are limited at Seaside, probably about 550 people. So at some point, I have to cut it off when we get to that point. So
Yeah, appreciate
expect a
that.
good crowd.
Yeah. And I will
What is-
publicly apologize that I will not be able to be attending. So if the CTE folks don't see me there, it has nothing to do. But my wife and I will be out of the country, out of the area. So
Well, that was a Freudian slip. You're out of the country.
kind of. We're still in the United States territories, so I'll leave it at that. All right. So let's jump in then into the conversation today. I'd like to just put a little bit of a backdrop. Number one, there's been some fabulous content building to the report that everybody has seen and that was circulated, and hopefully everybody's had a chance to actually review the report. We're going to stay together as a large group, and hopefully that will allow us the opportunity. So Todd and Beth Wiggum and I are going to kind of look at the crowd, and we're going to try to identify hands up where people want to give some verbal input and so forth. But we're going to also be asking, as we do the review today, is that if people have suggestions, would like to do some things outside of what our public comment and so forth is, we'd like you to then email those suggestions and so forth. Don't place it in the comments, but email it and include then Todd and Beth. And we will keep the focus of those comments going to the two of them. So, and Beth has very graciously agreed to continue to help with the formatting and content as we're going through. The other side is that when we originally set off on this report, we were trying to target that this be 8 pages or less. And it is of course, with great content, has swelled to 15. And so we have a bit of a conundrum in regard to that. And so what I'd like to do would be to kind of get the group's impressions of how long would a report be that still holds the reader's attention, and understand that the reader, this is going to be submitted to the Workforce Talent and Development Board, but also likely to the governor's office, and also likely to legislators and or people within the community that we would like to engage. I mean, we try to use this to help leverage our conversation as we're working out through there. So I'd just like some quick feedback in regard to what length should we be targeting, and that will maybe shape some of our conversations on content. Anybody? Please raise your hand so we can actually see you.
Charlie, just jumping in a little bit. I think we had originally sort of targeted 10 pages. We just context for some of the folks who maybe weren't at the last meeting or are new to the group. We sort of broke the report into 3 subsections that align with the WRC charter. The first one being Oregon employability skills, and Charlie and Sherry primarily worked on that. The second being STEM Lift, which was led, as you'll recall, by Venkat and Srala. And the third around dual credit in CTE, which included leadership from Beth Wiggum, Shali Hodgson, and Eric Juniman behind the scenes. So then those smaller groups provided their draft of those sections, and staff pulled those together in a report that I think the latest version, our good friend and colleague Beth Wiggum has over on her probably laptop right now that she's been working on. And I think Charlie also, Beth was going to sort of ask some questions around content as well. So that's some context. And we were originally sort of, if I remember right, Charlie, isn't that right? 8 to 10 pages we were sort of targeting.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we got a hand raised, a couple of them. Tom, first to you.
Yeah, just in looking at it, this is not a context, but it's more of a layout suggestion where you've got the executive summary. If that can be like a separate page broken away from the rest of it, because it just looks like it's continuing to run and you don't, if somebody's reading it, they don't really know when they think the executive summary's over. So I think that needs to be its own separate page.
Excellent comment. I thought of that one this morning as well. I'm glad you caught it. Sarala.
Yeah, I think it's fine whether we have 10 or 15 pages from my perspective, but what's really important is that we have a really robust and sort of key takeaway executive summary, because I think that's where the greater focus is going to be. So let's make sure it's very complete in what we want people to take away from our report.
Mm-hmm. Georgia, hi, by the way. Oh, muted. Sorry.
There. Hi.
Hello.
I agree. I think that it doesn't really matter if you hit the 15-page mark. People, if they're interested, are really going to dive down into the detail. You have to have the executive summary that can be a takeaway with key outcomes, highlights, legislative asks, and the metrics. Where are the targets that we're aiming toward, and how are we meeting those?
Okay, there was a commentary as we were kind of going through this in regard of whether we should actually detail out the legislative recommendations of each of the various sections and so forth. So if we do that, you've seen the regular report, those recommendations will actually take up some significant space. So we can probably condense some of that language down, but we'll probably have that in there. But I think that I've heard through the grapevine that indeed having those recommendations and that outcome and content pieces would be really important. And maybe I'm not sure how it comes out, whether the executive summary actually ends up being a secondary document.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe like even 2 or 3 takeaways where you have a consolidated document.
Yeah. Howard, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Charlie, and everyone else. The one thing that I was going to suggest is when I've done documents like this, I definitely leverage the use of appendices, because there's often going to be bulky stuff that, you're right, will take up a lot of space. But if you put it in the appendices, it shortens the body of the main content. So I would encourage consideration of appendices.
Mm-hmm. General format question to the group. One of the thoughts that came up was to allow the appendices, but then also almost have a links page, that if somebody wanted to know, garner further information, that you could provide those links as a portion of the document. Now that works as long as it's an electronic document. And so, but there was some discussion on that as well. These are good. These are helpful, by the way. This is kind of what we're searching for. So, any others? I see faces.
Deb just put a comment in there about a table of contents.
I know I'm not supposed to use the comments, but sorry. I just think that table of contents would be help people get to the section they want to get to.
Okay. You mean it's not all sections, Deb?
Well, we could force them to read the whole report to get to what they want to learn.
All right. Any other thoughts?
I'm just curious and Todd and Beth, fabulous job on this, but how these recommendations are going to be aligned to like what's happening in clean energy, what's happening in the AI semiconductor, because there's a lot of overlap here.
Mhm.
But like when you get to dual credit, access to dual credit, but we're done with dual credit access. We're about stackable and transferable. Same thing is happening in the health sciences, right? So I'm just curious if there's any need to crosswalk, or we don't need to go to that level of detail in this report, because there's a lot more meat and some really great new ideas around collaboration in some of those consortia sectors. And so just food for thought.
Todd, I see your hand.
I'll answer Deb's question second, but first, when you said table of contents, ironically, just yesterday I was provided, Deb, with a template that is one that HEC uses, I think, more probably in their research department in terms of what they use to provide a report. If it's like, for example, if ORS requires that on an annual or biannual basis, the HEC report to the legislature on a particular program or initiative with, highlights and outcomes, that was forwarded to me. So, I mean, we could consider, and I'm happy to share it with you, Beth Wiggum, we could consider just utilizing that template to a degree, because it does have all the sort of formatting set up with the table of contents in front and logos. Heck, we could add the WTDB and go from there. So thanks for that idea, Deb. The second thing, to your point, could you say a little bit more about what you see when you talk about sort of cross-connecting? I mean, we could, at a higher level, obviously, call out some of the other efforts that you're involved in, Venkat's involved in, Srala's involved in, to try and sort of connect it. But that's at a high level. So I think if we wanted to do it as, a tick down or two in detail, getting some language from folks in terms of what that looks like would be helpful, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think I can share the slide decks that we just spent the last 48 hours down at OSU. We have 95 partners, right, in the AI and semiconductor sector, which is really advanced manufacturing on so many levels. But we had 8 reviewers with NSF, and this is for the 160 million, and we're feeling really great about it. They gave us fantastic feedback. So Kyle Ritchie Knoll and I are the co-directors of workforce development for that FAST. And so what we did, and they made us organize ourselves into these bands, like what are we doing in K-12? What are we then doing? And we put CTE, community college and university, and then we could put trades, things in there. But in that second band, because CTE needs to have that running start dual credit that's stackable and transferable, that's industry informed. And then we had a whole section for upskilling and reskilling incumbent workers. We're working with veterans and VA. And so when we banded those strategies of starting early, 4th grade, building identities of getting 500 AI and semiconductor people in 4th grade classrooms for Engineers Week, that's that identity. So we just teacher externships all the way then to curriculum. We just banded them by kind of where people go from, I don't want to say cradle to career, but from elementary school all the way to career. So I don't know. And then Oregon, I pitched heavily Oregon employability skills, where those should be embedded, because those are so important, and how we're going to build those into mechatronics programs of study, physics, chemistry, everything that feeds that AI and semiconductor pathway. So it's more details than you need for this report, but it might be just nice to look at that. And I'm happy to share the PowerPoints with you. I don't think they're totally proprietary. I won't share research or translation to practice. Those have a little bit more IP in them, so that you can kind of just see how we banded it. So I glanced at this for 10 minutes, so I should not even be giving you feedback on this report, but I think, and then Chris, you could speak to how you guys in clean energy are coming into your strategies, probably in elementary, middle, post-secondary, and then the reskilling incumbent worker space.
If I can, I'll just add a real quick thing, and then Howard, I'll snap over to you. But my sense is that as a part of our charter is that the WRC actually is a convener. So in this case, I think what we're really trying to do is to capture, those areas that are complementing one another, so that they are, in a sense, not owned by, but brought together through this focus that we're providing there. So it's possible then maybe through the rewrite we're asking here, Deb, is that maybe there's a couple more bullets that we add to the STEM lift section that would simply document and allow the reader to understand, yes, there is a quote unquote collaborative effort going on here, because it does impact all those different areas. So it's one of those things I would really want to continue to really push on the collaboration that's going on. So,
and is this framework the underlying document that all these consortia strategies build off of, or kind of understanding how it plays in?
I think it would be, yeah. And I think that might be a suggestion. Once you've got a chance to read what's there, see how it might interlink. And if we can add perhaps some of those bullets under that STEM lift piece, maybe that makes sense. So, Howard, and then I'll grab everybody else too here real quick.
Yeah, this is a quick one. I read this, I went through it, and it's really good. But I would also say it wasn't always clear to me as to what were the top takeaways that you wanted me to walk away from in this document. It was 12 pages. It's very much a narrative. But what are the key things that should jump out at me that you would, if I could remember one or two things in each section, what is that?
Great. I like that. I call that punch when I talk to somebody. So what's the punch? Chris.
Without having the full context of what started at the beginning of this process and where the information came from to make it, from my perspective, I think the opportunity in many ways is to reframe the language around career and technical education. Like the way that it's written in this document positions it as a learning experience, when in reality, it should be the extension of the workforce development system, right? I was even listening to the governor's business prosperity blueprint this morning. It ended at post-secondary. Like we're gonna connect post-secondary and business, and that's our opportunity. But the high school system should be, the extension of that entire process. And so, in some ways, I think that there's an opportunity to reframe the language around CTE to be more of like an extension of the workforce development system, and less just like this is a learning experience that kids get, and really the focus is on the sort of unidirectional partnership model where we get kids access to internships and things like that, when instead, like, it should really be about creating opportunities for students to enter the economy. And so to Deb's point around the semiconductor work, and then I'm leading some work to develop the state's first CTE pathway in clean energy. That's being done at the consortium level, with the intention or the goal being that really what we're trying to do is to start with the partners and industry at the table from the beginning, and then build backwards to the CTE system, which is not how CTE has been built in our state really ever.
I personally, I really like what you just said, and I know Beth is listening with a great intensity out there to maybe figure out a way that we could capture that. I'd like that, and even just some subtle rephrasing in what we have there.
I can send I'll
Excellent.
send it to Todd and Beth specifically.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris, very much.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Yeah. I'll go to Sorella and then Todd. Back to you.
Yeah, so I agree with you, Charlie, about putting some more items in the bulleted list and STEM lift if we have missed some key ones, based on what Deb is talking about or other initiatives. But perhaps also in the executive summary or somewhere, making it clear that our recommendations are in alignment with these other larger initiatives, right? So they right away see that up front, and they don't have these questions about like, are these all fragmented approaches, or, I mean, it may not be a complete list, but at least the ones that are there should be in alignment with what is being done in different work groups, yeah, or different initiatives.
Even a sentence simply stating that could make a big difference, similar
Yeah.
to actually Chris's suggestion there as well. So great input. Thank you. Todd, you got all this down?
Yeah, thank you, Charlie. I had a similar thing to what you just said, Strala. I was thinking after listening to Deb talk, in the spirit of alignment of all of this work, it seemed like it lent itself well to even a sentence or two, Charlie, in the introduction of the entire paper, and then to your point, Sarala, include something in the executive summary, and then also tie it up in the conclusion. And thank you, Howard. I really liked what you said in terms of what are the key takeaways, what's the quick 2 or 3 punch list of nuggets that we want people to walk away with.
Yeah, and the reality of the work that we've been taking on here is either actionable items or simply just engaging in the conversation is so collaborative. And again, that's witnessed by 22 people being on this particular call, which just, again, on a monthly basis as we have this meeting, it just amazes me. So glad to see it. Any other comments? These have been really, I think personally, these have been very helpful. So. And it's hard for me to keep visual, hands, chat, and email comments. Anything else out there? All right. Beth, do you want to take a swing at a couple of the questions that you've had that might prompt some further content in the conversation?
Yeah. I'm just inspired by your comments and feedback. Some of those have been been put into the newest version, so I know that you all don't have that yet. We're still refining, but it's nice to hear what's landing with all of you and where we can do better. So what we thought was, I think what was mentioned earlier is we're going to just stay as a big group, but just a little bit of time for you to provide feedback on just a few kind of look for. So as you were kind of going through the document, what were some things that you really felt engaged about, inspired you, or has energized you? Is there anything that you feel like is really anchored in coherence? I think this newer version that we have does a little bit more of that coherence across the initiative. So that was mentioned. But are you seeing also like the outcomes in the different initiatives? And then where does the information maybe feel a little bit repetitive, abstract, like it's not really quite landing, or maybe it's just too lengthy? And where can we consolidate or do some improvements in those areas? So what we thought is maybe you could pick a section to look at and kind of spend some time in there. If there's more specific feedback about like particular edits or language edits, I think that Charlie mentioned, go ahead and email Todd and I about those very specific edits. But just in general, these questions, we were kind of hoping that you'd be able to provide some feedback on. So I think what we could do is, oh, yeah, go ahead, Todd.
I was just wondering, there's been so much flying around. I think I know the answer to this question, but just to make sure, people haven't seen the latest version of the introduction, have they?
They have not.
Is there any
no.
way before they sort of look at the different sections that maybe they've been involved in from the get-go, or are interested in, that you could pull that up and just let them read the intro? Because I think it's evolved into a much better intro. I think that'd be helpful.
Sure. Do you want me to go ahead and share my screen, or?
Yeah,
that'd be great.
Yep, could do that. Just give me just a moment. Make it bigger for everyone. Just one moment.
Keep going if you can, Beth.
Can you go bigger at all, Beth?
I can, yes. I would need to scroll for people to see.
There we go.
I know I'm gonna have to put my glasses on.
All right.
Let me know when we need to scroll.
Yeah, we'll all read silently together.
Sorry.
Go ahead and scroll, Beth. We can probably scroll to the base of this at this point. Here we go. I'll call the question. Input. Perceptions, impressions. I could put Howard on the shtick and say, okay, Howard, how do we want to make this punchy?
I think to me, it actually really covered the key points well, and maybe I've just been thinking about it. That's why one one kind of nit I have is when we always call it semiconductor manufacturing. And I think it should be semiconductor industry, because when people think about manufacturing, they're always just thinking about those skills rather than the broader engineering base and all that. So I've seen this in many documents. And so, yeah.
It's a great observation. Tom.
Yeah, my only concern is it makes it sound like we're just responding to AI and to the semiconductor industry. When in fact, you have healthcare, transportation, some of those things, which are big draws for workforce needs. And it almost looks like we're walking away from the existing workforce need that is current. That's just my observation. I don't,
Or
again, what,
maybe stressing the breadth of challenges to all of Oregon's industries.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's good to leave everything behind and just say we're only focused on the future stuff.
Okay. Chris.
There is some good research-based language in here, which I appreciate. Towards the bottom, the language is convener and broker, I think, which is comes from boundary spanning leadership, which is a leadership theory, which I think is great. But that I think there's an opportunity here also, again, as I was mentioning before, like to add education into the conversation. I think that this is framed as being the convener and broker for industry, but I think being convener and broker also means that you are like bringing education into the conversation. So you're essentially being a broker between the workforce system and the education system, which is, you know, like I think how workforce development gets done. So I think there's an opportunity to bring some of that language in here to speak a little bit more explicitly about what education's role is. The second thing that I'll say is, you know, like these 4 pillars, I understand how they're framed, but they're also not framed in a way that makes me think that they're actually working together. It makes me feel like they're solving 4 separate problems, which maybe is true, and maybe that's the intention, but I think there is an opportunity to think a little bit more intentionally about what's the relationship between these 4 pillars. Like, what is the relationship between STEM lifts and CTE, or what is the relationship between, you know, any of the pillars and how they sort of work together. I think that's just some feedback that I have.
Yeah, that's some good feedback. In fact, as I've talked to Beth and Sherry and Todd kind of in the background and so forth, I think there's been the concern of wanting to achieve kind of what you were exactly talking about, is let them build upon each other rather than treat them as individual silos and so forth. So I like the feedback. As I was listening to you, I was going, acting as a convener and broker of education through industry, or from, that just a couple of words could really broaden out that sense of takeaway. So I'd like to add one as well, if I can. We talk in the previous paragraphs about, let me go back up to it. The last sentence of the paragraph ahead of that, it says, to capitalize on these opportunities, the state must overcome persistent challenges, including fragmented governments and a teacher readiness gap regarding emerging technologies. That felt too focused on the teacher side. I think it's really, I wanted to change that into some way of saying, focus on the speed and the services to the learner, because I think that's what it's about, is that and that there is that gap there, but it's a gap, by the way, in industry as well as education, coming back to your point, Chris. So maybe we can do some wordsmithing in regard to that. So I just had a deja vu moment. I have a lot of those as my age increases. Although I can't remember the deja vu. Okay. Little levity, hopefully. Any other comments? I will publicly also say my deep appreciation to Todd and Beth and Sherry in particular, who have really tried to kind of take this cohesive conversation and kind of craft it. And Chris, indeed, there has been some research through Beth and through Sherry in regard to how you phrase and put things out there and so forth. So you've added a lot to that conversation. So thank you, Beth. And Sherry, I think you're out there as well. So maybe she was terribly sick yesterday. So Howard.
Yeah, the one thing that I will say with regards to the comprehensive legislative recommendations for 2027, it starts out saying that this is a multi-year strategy focused on alignment, innovation, and measurable outcomes. Yet, I am not clear what is needed in the short term, the midterm, and the long term. Are there any priorities around these things? Because there's 12 of them. And if it comes across as this is our ask, all 12 might be a little intimidating. And they may pick and choose, not are the most critical. So some type of way to convey what is needed immediately in the short term, next, mid-range or midterm, and then what will kind of close it off in the context of this multi-year strategy.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think even maybe like categorizing it in different, if they come into different categories would be good, more consumable. Yeah.
Because not all of them, for instance, are legislative. So that might be interesting to kind of parse those out a little bit. So
Charlie had another comment. I just responded to Howard, but overall, I just hope that we can get across a real sense of urgency here, because it's so alarming how deep in the hole we are. And whatever language is used, I think we really need to get this across, how important and critical it is. Because a lot of times when I've spoken to people and some legislators, it's just doesn't seem to be landing, because we have so many very immediate problems like homelessness or healthcare. So the urgency of it, without sounding alarmist, I think is very, very critical in the document.
completely agree. Yeah, so how to properly relay that sense of urgency without it also potentially foretelling calamity. So yeah.
Charlie, I just wanted to also mention that we did call out, and staff intends to follow through with that call out, that the report would also be circulated with agency leadership at the key agencies that touch workforce development. So HEC, ODE, obviously, OED, Oregon Employment Department, DHS, Business Oregon,
Right.
and likely others. OBI comes to mind. I think we had talked back upstream about making sure that we distributed it broadly to leadership, so that it really builds awareness around the work that you all have done and contributed to in 2025.
So if we could get this done by the end of this week, then any of those going to the Oregon Business Summit could actually take physical copies and just start handing those out to people as you're walking around, because unfortunately I can't go this year. So that's 2 against me, Tom, I know. And so, but anyway, I'm anxious to use forums like that for exactly that purpose, Todd, that it allows us that opportunity to pass these out and say there is collaborative work that's being done, and particularly business and industry.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I just wish we had a little bit more time. I don't know if this resonates with people, but I'm willing to work on it if Beth is. Yeah, I think it was sort of the strategy last year when you and Tom said, wouldn't it be great if our report was shorter and we could utilize it not only as a report, but a leave behind for conversations, particularly with business and industry, as well as with the legislature that folks might have. I wonder, this ties back, I think, to Sarala's earlier points. I wonder if we sort of try to pump out something that's workable to hand out at the summit, or provide a stack of the executive summary, and use the executive summary as the handout. I think trying to get the report done, finalized, and all neat and tidy by early Monday morning may be unrealistic, but I think maybe we could do that with the executive summary.
Well, and I think potentially we could label it as such, in a sense of saying a peek of what's to come to help Oregon's talent pipeline, or something that's going to tickle them, with that 1 page, maybe front and back kind of summary. I love that idea though. So maybe we can work on that first and get that taken care of. So. Other comments? This has been really helpful. And quite frankly, and being very frank, you all have a sense of ownership, hopefully, in this document. So we really want all of us to be proud of the fact that this has been created, and it ends up being a tool to continue our voice forward. It's been it's been incredible in this journey.
Charlie, I don't know if Beth, are you still on?
I'm here.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we should set a deadline for folks that want to contribute some language. I know Chris said he would. I think maybe Deb Mumhill might want to, in terms of what she called out. Maybe Sarala does. And if any of the others on the call today are interested in sending remarks, should we give them a deadline? Just, I mean, if we're going to try and do this and have an executive summary ready by Monday at the summit, we probably need to leave a little time for Beth and I to work on it.
Yep.
So I don't know if close of business, what's today, Wednesday? Yeah. Is close of business tomorrow too unrealistic, or maybe midnight tomorrow?
No, I would totally agree. And I guess I would prioritize it by saying, please focus initial impressions on anything in the executive summary and maybe split it out and then say regular document. That way we could incorporate and really drive on that executive summary piece as hard as we could between now and the next couple of days. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Charlie. I was going to say, I think that what might be helpful is if those that are wanting to provide specific feedback that we can incorporate, maybe seeing the updated version, then that way we can, like, you'll be able to kind of really focus in on where we can make the changes there.
Okay. Are you going to send that out then to Todd, either you or Leah?
Yeah, we can. I think I have a link to that. We'll just save it as a Word doc and send it out to everybody.
Great.
Because I think we can still get it off that link you sent yesterday, right, Beth?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, awesome.
And it's a little bit messy in the front because I did some editing, but Google doesn't have quite the thing that Word does. So when my strike throughs turned into red, and then my changes are in color. So anyway, Beth, you do what you need to do with those.
Yeah, Charlie, I can work with you for less than 5 minutes and we can clean it up too.
All right. Maybe we can edit here. But that's a good idea. So as an end of business tomorrow.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Another thing I wanted to mention that somebody reminded me of yesterday is that at some point in this project, we need to go through with the state's recent requirements around making documents accessible to all, potential readers, and make this document accessible based on the prescriptive requirements. I don't know that, we need to do that so quickly. I think we could do that even after it's been approved ultimately on December 12th by the WTDB. But just flagging that, Charlie, so everybody knows.
Okay, great. And based on the feedback that we have, I'm going to kind of let the 4 of us, Sherry, Beth, Todd, and myself, try to figure out how much we can get done and whether we can actually make the 12th as the full document process or not. So we'll have to kind of, again, based upon all of your feedback and the things we've seen today, I don't see any what I'll call major rewrites. What I see is additions and maybe some formatting that will allow the primary document to potentially be longer than we had originally expected, but not humongous. The executive summary to be a document that holds up by itself with more clarity, with recommendations, outcomes, and so forth, potential metrics if we have those in there, and allow us a little bit of flexibility there to be able to put something forward to the WTDB for signature, adoption and signature. But that also means they need to see it before the meeting, and that's what I'm concerned about. So we'll talk about that. Okay, we're just about done. Any other comments, final comments before we go into general business? Todd?
Charlie, I think you and I talked about this, so you and I know, but I'm not sure what the rest of folks think. And that is, does it make sense, or to your point earlier, Sarala, around urgency, would it give the report, we've done this in the past sometimes, would it give the report more of that sense and more credibility if particularly, well, let's just say those that are able to, given their role, either in the business community or other spaces, some of us state agency people won't be able to participate, but would it make sense to, on the last page of the document, Charlie and others, to have you sign sign your name as a representative of a particular sector in support of the document? Just a thought.
Yeah. Like, are retired people allowed to do it, or?
Absolutely. They ain't putting us on the shelf, Sarala.
Well, you can sign, Sarala, as a WTDB member,
There you
right?
go.
Like you have
Yeah.
other credentials and
Oh,
like where you're
okay.
highly tied to this. Yeah, that would be
I
your,
see.
because I'm retiring next Friday too, so.
Oh.
Joining the team.
Yeah, right. Get prepared, Deb. You're going to be busier than you are right now.
Yeah.
Well, I'm moving to Sacramento, so I might have to get involved in some politics.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
You know, the other thing we could do is we could when the email goes out, we've done this before, when the email goes out, it could go out on behalf of, and then we have a list of folks in the salutation. Well, I guess that'd be the intro of an email, or for that matter, it could be in the salutation. Just trying to be cognizant of what you mentioned, Sarala, around urgency and sort of the gravity of the message.
Mhm.
I'm all for it if it helps.
Yeah, I like the general idea. I think is great, and so, and I mean it's great for me, and I know Tom as well, to kind of represent all of you in the conversation, certainly with the WTDB and so forth. But at the same point, I think it's critically important that all of you also be acknowledged, because we're working this process together. So I like the idea of a larger piece, larger endorsement. Howard.
I promise this will be my last comment. I'm just wondering, are we missing what is WRC's next step? We've made this tremendous ask of the legislatures. What are we going to do? Are we going to start scheduling meetings to talk with folks? What is our next step with the people we're trying to reach? That is, I think that might be missing.
Yeah, I thought about that also, just given the quote unquote project plan of the WRC and the need for some focus of what actions we're really trying to take as a group. I will say, I think we're late in the process of potentially trying to add that in regard to this particular report, but I think it's fair that perhaps we report back to our ownership body, the WTDB, that they be clear in regard to that, what that potential project plan is in regard to these elements, so that we could have follow-up. So good suggestion.
I think one thing, Todd, and I've mentioned this to you before, and to Venkat as well, is really powerful. We get time to present to someone on the governor's staff or like about these key things. Because I know that 1 hour I spent with Sarah, is it? I mean, she was like, oh, I wasn't even thinking of this, or I wasn't thinking of that, and there's so many things to think about. So obviously people like me can also reach out to legislators, and I plan on doing that as a citizen, that's next on my list. But I think formally being able to present to whoever is relevant on the governor's staff, I think will be impactful.
I like that idea.
So we should ask for it and get the right people in the group so that, we look all very credible. And
that's what I love everybody.
We could just add that to one of the last recommendation.
Yeah.
The other thing that made me think of Charlie and Beth, you probably remember because it was quite some time ago, but after one of these reports, it might have been the very first one back when this work was first starting under the Essential Employability Skills Task Force. I think there was a recommendation made in that report that a task force be formed to follow up on the report, which resulted in the passage of some legislation. Is that right, Beth? Did we lose her?
I'm not sure offhand. I'll need to look down in this section.
Anyway, it seemed to be somewhat successful. So I remember some of us staff were kind of surprised that a task force was actually formed to sort of take some of these things on, which was a multi-partner task force of state agencies and other partners. But, that might be, to the point about next steps, Howard, to form a task force and, and present to the governor's policy advisor, communicate with, have conversations with, et cetera.
Okay, I'm going to leave on I hope a good note, and Beth, this will incorporate you, but much to my surprise and perhaps even ignorance, I was having a conversation with Sherry Clark about where OES sits within the ecosystem of students graduating from the K through 12 primary experience. And I think Sherry and Beth, in a conversation, Beth advised Sherry that the language had actually been inserted so that the OES, essentially the OES platform, is written now into that fundamental mandate for career-connected learning through Senate Bill 3. So in a way, we have accomplished something that I thought we couldn't accomplish, and that is trying to make OES a mandate of graduation. So I'm still a little goosey myself after reading the materials, Beth, that you forwarded, that it's something that could actually be accomplished in a half-credit course. But at the same point, it is a dramatic step in the right direction, and I think potentially provides us a stepping stone of driving this fundamental skill development for Oregon learners forward and keep the momentum going. So I wasn't sure if how many of you outside of direct agencies might have been aware of that. We can circulate. Beth, I think you forwarded to Sherry, and Sherry forwarded to me the links of the language and so forth. And so maybe we could actually potentially forward those links out to the members of the WRC so that you can read through them. It's a little confusing to me dealing with statute and so forth and how administrative interpretation gets into this. But Beth, thank you for the work that was done in regard to that. And we owe her a round of applause, and Maggie and anybody else associated with ODE, thanks for making us get over the line, partially. So on that note, if we don't have anything else, we're all done for today. I have a lot of work to do.
Approve the minutes. I'm going to hold you to it.
Yeah, what's that?
Approve the minutes.
We did.
Oh, did I miss that?
Yeah, I did that.
When I walked out of the room for 5 minutes, I lost it. Sorry.
Yeah. I asked for any objections to
Oh,
the minutes.
okay. Yes. Okay. Got it.
And there were none. See, I just do it in a roundabout way because it's really difficult taking a show of hands.
Yeah, I got you, Charlie.
All right. Okay, everybody. Listen, thanks a lot. happy holidays to anybody in our various forms of celebration. The biggest thing is let's celebrate the fact that we can do lots of really positive things, and let's go do some of those next week at the Oregon Business Conference. So
Charlie, can you and Todd hang on for just 5 minutes?
I can.
All right, thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.